Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. It is Tuesday the 25th of November. Thank you for joining me as we take a look at the weather forecast across the rest of the week, the weekend, and how next week kicks off. On the satellite map today, we've got low pressure out in the Tasman Sea. That's producing a few offshore, well offshore thunderstorms. But as you move into New Zealand itself, you're actually running into high pressure, which is parked smack bang over the top of the Chathams at the moment. So we've got a fair bit of cloud around the country, got some high cloud around the east, thicker lower level clouds into the west. So a fair bit of cloudy weather around the country as we are in between these two air pressure systems. There's also low pressure up here in the subtropics. We talked about that last week, but because of the high around the Chatham Islands, that subtropical system doesn't look to be coming towards us. So here is the air pressure map going into this evening. That subtropical low quite nearby, but the shape of the high pressure zone sort of ballooning out north of New Zealand, that kind of keeps that low away from us. There is an easterly wind between the low and the high that is driving into the top of the country, turning around more as a nor'easter around Northland, Auckland and parts of Coromandel Peninsula, and also down the eastern side of the country. You've also got that northeasterly flow. In fact, it may even affect parts of the west coast. But look at all the low pressure out to our west and around Australia in the dark shading there. So a lot of low pressure, and of course, Tropical Cyclone Fina, still Category 3, severe tropical cyclone as we recorded this, although quite likely by the time you're watching it, it's been downgraded and may well be an ex-cyclone as early as later today, now that it is over the top of land. So that's not going to affect New Zealand. So let's have a look and see what is. As we've got high pressure east of us, and here on Wednesday, it goes even further east away from us. And with all that low pressure to the west and south of New Zealand, classic squash zone. Windy weather on Wednesday coming through with strong gusty conditions, mostly from about central Canterbury up to about the very lower North Island. Rain or showers on the west coast, could be a couple of heavy falls in there, and around the North Island also a couple of showers around which may bubble up and become a little bit heavy. As we go into Thursday, this now shows 24 hours of rainfall. That is 24 hours from lunchtime tomorrow Wednesday to lunchtime Thursday. Heaviest rain here on the west coast, where potentially up to about 80 millimetres is forecast. Most of that rain though in the southern half of the west coast, lower totals further up around Greymouth and Westport. We've got some showers around the western and northern parts of the North Island on Thursday and the southern western side. Again, not very much, just a few showers possible, and mostly dry, if not completely dry in the east, but there may just be a wee bit of spillover in some areas in the South Island as the rain band comes in over the South Island, but over the Southern Alps, I should say. But those windy nor'westers, you can see them a bit better here in the purple shading or the darker shading through the mountains. And this actually shows around parts of Canterbury, wind gusts getting up to about 120 kilometres an hour on the tops of the mountains and ranges, which means if you're living or farming on the foothills and nearby, some blustery conditions through the South Island and even further southwards around parts of northern Southland and Otago, we might be seeing some gusty conditions as we do see around Fovo Strait and Stewart Island, and a little bit in the lower North Island as well. Why don't I show the rest of the country? Because the gusty winds aren't there. I only show these wind maps when it's getting up to 90, 100 kilometre an hour gusts. So on Friday, a lot of that windy weather actually falls apart. We don't have the stormy stuff that's nearby to the southwest. That is staying south of New Zealand, but the polar boundary does come up, and you will notice some areas, the temperatures changing and fluctuating a bit. In fact, if you look at the South Island's temperatures, a number of main centres are really seeing ups and downs with the temperatures. And as you go into the North Island, it's a bit more consistent, although we've got some cooler and some hotter days appearing in the east. Some of you over in New Plymouth, take a look at your overnight and daytime temperatures. They're remarkably similar over the next couple of days, sort of 19 the high, 18 the low, that sort of thing. That usually only happens around Wellington, that kind of consistent temperature. So we've got some showers around. The leftovers of that west coast rain on Friday really falls apart into the North Island, but there will be some wet weather around Manawatu, Taranaki, coming into Waitomo, Waikato as we go through Friday, and a slightly cooler change coming in with a west to southwest change. On Saturday, you can see that southwesterly change kind of a little clearer. We do have a few showers on the western side of the North Island, but many places are dry on Saturday at this stage. I say at this stage because it is a little bit unsettled around New Zealand this weekend, and of course, big storms south of us, and they are well south of us, but that's going to send another surge of colder and also windier weather in some areas in the south. Further northwards, those winds may be a bit warmer. Track the origins of them. They're actually coming out from around Australia. So into Sunday, that's where we see low pressure coming back in again. It's pretty weak based on this map. And it means that as we go into the afternoon in particular, we may see some wet weather moving into the North Island. And again, that's coming in to the west and the north. If you live in the east, not expecting very much rain. Similar story into the South Island, but because of that southwesterly wind, there may be some further showers that spread around Southland and Otago, the polar boundary right next to you, which means temperatures will start to drop. And of course, we've got a large storm here, well south of us. It's not, the wind from that storm's not affecting us, but the airflow, you will feel that cooler air coming into the south while it's still fairly mild around the north. And we go into next week, and the polar boundary back up again over Tassie. They're having a pretty rough November. If you think you've had it bad in New Zealand, they've had it much worse as far as cold weather is concerned. So wintry weather returns on Monday for Tassie and Victoria. But here in New Zealand, with high pressure in between all of that, we're actually going to see a nor'wester developing out of parts of Queensland and New South Wales, and that will start to arrive into the South Island. But because we've got a southerly flow here, we will see some morning showers. They might bring a few showers into those dry eastern areas, but at this stage, doesn't look like to be very much. That's all from me for today. I will see you again tomorrow, Wednesday, with our next New Zealand update.